Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're out at the range with a new product from B&T. It's the APC10. But first, let's talk about the APC9. This little beauty was introduced by B&T in 2011, and it quickly became my favorite PCC/SMG. Now, I have shot them on fully automatic, but this is a semi-auto thanks to the NFA and the Hughes Amendment. But anyway, it is an SBR. But I quickly fell in love with this firearm. It became my favorite gun of its type in the PCC/SMG or 9mm carbine category. And there's a number of reasons for that. First of all, the quality is just through the roof. And second of all, it's one of the more mild shooting blowback firearms on the market because of a patented buffering system in the rear of the firearm. When I was in Switzerland, I was taking a look at some of the guns they were producing, and I said, guys, it'd be so cool if you made one of these in 10mm. And either they were really good at hiding what they were up to, or they weren't giving it much consideration back then. But looking at the US market, B&T has been very responsive, and knowing that 10mm is taking off again, they went ahead and produced this in 10mm. Let's go ahead and fire off some Federal 115 grain syntek ammunition. Our friends at Federal do supply ammunition to the channel for free, so we'd like to thank them for doing that. All right. Well, that bolt release in this thing is really hard to get at, but this is an older version. It's been updated. We'll talk about those updated features as well. All right, do I have my red dot on? I do not. I do now. Let's knock over these steel plates. Such a smooth shooting, cool little gun. Easily my favorite 9mm PCC. All right, let's take a look at the B&T 10 and compare it to the 9mm and get an idea of how it compares size-wise, and also how some of the features have changed from this particular model to the APC 10. This is the APC 10. On top of it, I have a RMR, and I have it mounted to the APC 10 via a Midwest Industries quick detach mount. Technically, I set this a little bit lower, but it's the only mount I had. I just threw it on here, but it's set up for AR height, AR-15 height. Because this thing actually has a lower comb to the brace here, your face will sit lower, so you don't really need that riser sitting up quite so high. So it's going to be one of those AK sight type holds that I'll be shooting the gun with today. Now, the nice thing about the APC 10 is it uses Glock mags. Now, the current generation of APC 9mm, you can get them with different lowers, which will allow you to use Glock mags versus the standard B&T magazine that you saw in the APC 9 when we opened up the video this morning. All right, so let's go ahead and stick a Glock mag in there. Look at that big, beautiful 10mm round sitting there. And now the bolt release has been updated versus pushing it in. I can push down, which is much easier to do. And we have a non-reciprocating charging handle on both sides of the gun, so I can actually shoot with my thumb up here where the charging handle is more forward on the 10. On the 9mm, the charging handle set further back here. So I can do a thumb over and still not have to worry about that charging handle hitting me. On the earlier gun, again, it's setting back here. So you can still do the thumb over grip if you want to. All right, let's start off with some of the steel plates. We'll finish up on the man-sized ringer there. Bolt locks open, and yeah, a very smooth shooting firearm for being a full power 10mm. Now, that was an actual Glock mag. You can pick up these SGM mags, and this is from our friends over at Gun Mag Warehouse. Check them out. They sent these magazines over for free for another video, but these also work in the B&T. Now, these are a little bit snug. All right, where the Glock mags fit in, fall out real smooth. These SGM magazines fit the gun a little bit more tightly, not quite as well fitted as the Glock mags. My rope's over here. Reset my challenge target down there. And let's go ahead and do some shooting with the SGM mag. That is pure 10mm goodness. When I posted pictures of my APC10 on the internet, people asked me, how did it compare to the Chris Vector in 10mm? I assume they're talking about in terms of a recoil impulse. In terms of a recoil impulse, they're very similar. This one has a very different type of recoil impulse because you have the bolt mass traveling down in an L shape. That's why you have this big blocky area here. The bolt actually comes back and goes down, and that vectors the recoil forces downward. Now in a semi-automatic like this is an SBR, but in a semi-automatic like this, you can't really tell that that mechanism is doing anything for you. The gun still jumps around as you would expect it to. It's not like perfectly flat. However, when you fire these on full auto and they have a very high cyclic rate, then you can tell that that system really is helping keeping that muzzle down. Another thing that is interesting about the Chris is if you have it as a pistol, because a vert grip is illegal in the United States unless you have it registered as any other weapon or an SBR in this case, this thing really needs a vert grip, because if you don't, you have a tendency to grab it here, and look where my thumb goes, right here over the bolt stop. And so to keep it from locking open. Now the charging handle is non-reciprocating, but it's all too easy to ride that when you grip it like this without the vert grip, and it just has awkward ergonomics. Most of the weight is forward of the pistol grip, so it's a very nose-heavy gun, and that vert grip also helps. Plus, it helps keep you from getting your hand out in front of the muzzle, especially this one from Fab Defense that has that hand stop right there. It's actually perfect for what we're doing. Also, we just fixed this morning and it's already broken again. The spring on the Chris that holds this charging handle forward, we can't get the spring to stay on its perch, so now it's just flopping around again. That's awesome. We're glad we spent an hour this morning fixing it. But other than that, it's an interesting gun, but it's awkward. It's about 99% reliable, at least this one in 10mm. So it's just an okay firearm. It does feed from Glock magazines. Now this was one of the earlier 10mm that were on the market. Granted, there were 10mm carbines and PCCs available in like the AR platform type stuff. But this is one of the earliest 10mm out there that was dedicated to 10mm being a PCC. Now we're seeing all sorts of companies doing it, and there's a variety of, I mean, heck, even High Point has a 10mm carbine they've had out for at least a year, maybe 2 years now on the market. So let's do a little bit of shooting with this and get back to the APC10. When I did that fast trigger pull, the sight's jumping around just as much on this as it is on the B&T APC10. But there you go, the Vector in 10mm. Also in my Instagram post on the APC10, people had mentioned that the guns don't work with hollow points. I went out and made another Instagram post doing a video showing the APC10 running some Federal hollow points that I had. So we decided today to try something different. I had some leftover Freedom munitions. This is some 180 grain XTP hollow point ammo. And we'll see, we know it runs with the Federals. Let's see if it runs with the Freedom Munitions ammo. So that's two different types of hollow point ammunition I fired out of my APC10, and it's ran fine with both flavors. So I don't doubt there might be some folks out there having problems with their particular hollow points. Just try something different if you're going to run hollow points in the gun. Me personally, I'm not going to be shooting hollow points a whole lot, but I can understand if it's a duty weapon, you'll probably want or be required by your department to use hollow points, but just make sure the gun works the hollow points you choose. This APC10 I picked up from Copper Custom. They will be stocking the APC10s going forward. Now, let's take a look at my first generation APC9 and compare it to the current production APC10, which is still in what would be considered its Gen 1 phase. This is its original configuration. They haven't modified it yet. This has gone through some evolutionary changes, basically what they now call the APC9 Pro. Now, this has the Pro changes on it, but it's just labeled APC10. It doesn't have the Pro designation, but it has the Pro features in the lower receiver. On the original APC9, of course, we had the charging handle back here, which is reciprocating. That's been moved forward on the new generation Pro guns, if you will. And you can see that charging handle here. Now it can be moved from one side or to the other, but it reciprocates. But it does so from back here, so you can do that thumb over thing that I was talking about on the range. This gun does have plastic sights that are truly backup sights for pure emergency purposes only. And those sights have been left off the APC10. But the rear end of the guns are the same. As a matter of fact, the brace that I used on the APC10 is the exact same brace that I used on this one. It was a pistol before I SBR'd it. So if you want to pick up an SB Tactical brace with the butt cap that it comes with, the standard APC9 brace will fit on the 10. But this is a stock because this one's an SBR. Now, this gun does not have a swappable grip on it. And as I mentioned before, when you want to lock the bolt open on this, there's a little button on the bottom. You can push up with your firing finger, pull the bolt to the rear, and that'll lock it in the rear position. And from either side of the receiver, you have this button that you can push. So when you push the magazine in, it'd be most ideal to hit it with your thumb because you have the most leverage, versus trying to reach up with your index finger and push it, where you have very little leverage. Pushing the magazine in and hitting that will then drop that bolt forward. Then it has its own dedicated B&T magazines, and you have an older design of the magazine release here, and then I have a magazine release over here on the other side as well that you can see when I push it moves this mag release on the opposite side of the receiver. And then we have the tri-lug barrel. So that is an early generation APC9. Now let's take a look at the 10. The 10 has the Pro features, and the APC9 in a particular configuration was recently adopted by the US Army, which is the first submachine gun the US Army has adopted since World War II. And just as I say that, our A10s are out. But anyway, so let's start off here at the rear. As I'd already mentioned, this is just a standard brace, but if you SBR it, you can use a standard stock that would be the same stock that would be used on the 9mm version. Moving forward, we have a monolithic pick rail across the top, but we don't have backup sights integrated into the receiver anymore. If you want backup sights, you can put them on there yourself and just use any popular, backup sight that tickles your fancy. Looking at the pistol grip, this is a standard AR-15 style pistol grip. So now you can take this grip off and replace it and put whatever grip you would like on the gun. Jason replaced a pistol grip on one of the guns with a BCM. The BCM has a little tab that fits into the little area where the winter trigger guard would be on the AR-15. He had to cut that off the pistol grip, and then it fit right on. But any A2 grip or other grips probably will fit without any modification to the grip whatsoever. The selector levers have stayed the same. We have selector levers on both sides, fire and safe, and they're the same size. We have the magazine release, which is of a different design now than the original, but it accomplishes the same thing. You can hit the magazine release there with your index finger, and then on the other side, you have a button. So it's been moved from here to here, and when I push that button on the other side, you can see it works the magazine release. Another change, from the push button bolt release, we now have a lever here, and it's present on both sides of the receiver. And to lock the bolt to the rear, you'd push up on that with your index finger. Our A10s are really low today. Push up on that with the index finger, pull it to the rear, and it'll lock to the rear. Now I can push that charging handle forward because it's an independent piece and does not reciprocate when the gun fires. We also, just like the APC Pro features and what the US Army adopted on their gun, you have the folding charging handles up front. So move forward from here to here. You have pick rails that bolt onto the side, which are the same as the earlier generation, and you have a pick rail, of course, down here. Now, it does have a tri-lug barrel on it. I don't have a suppressor that's set up for it just yet. I'll probably do a dedicated video. I'm taking a look at the Griffin Armament Bushwhacker suppressor. They have an adapter for that will work with this tri-lug, and then I'll put this thing on the sound meter and see how it does. 10mm, I should be able to find some subsonic loads out there because the bullet weights are fairly heavy to begin with. So that ought to be fun. Whenever I get that can, I'll show you guys in a separate video. I'm looking forward to suppressing this gun. This is pretty important, guys. If you want the most reliable magazine, you're going to want to pick up a Glock magazine and put a Chris Vector 10mm extension on it, because it'll lock positively inside the gun every single time and feed extremely reliably. The SGMs will feed reliably in my experience, but they have a hard time locking in, so many times you'll have to push in and keep an eye on the mag catch here, kind of wiggle it around until you see it drop down, and now you'll see that it's seated. Simply hitting it won't do it. You're going to have to push forward and back while you push into the magazine well to get it to lock. So that's something to keep in mind. These are definitely more expensive. The SGMs are less expensive, but it's worth the extra money if you want that reliability. All right, so we got a guy at 150 yards standing out there amongst the trees, and we're going to shoot 10 rounds of 180 grain Federal ball ammunition and see if we can connect with him. I dropped one, but yeah. So where I was holding was just right at the top of his forehead at 150 yards, and this thing is zeroed at about 25 yards. So you don't have to hold all that high to score hits out at range. I know what you guys are gonna ask. Does it take Glock magazines? Well, yeah, I think we've already covered that, but does it 80s hip fire? And can I bump fire it? Well, let's find out. Yeah, it 80s hip fires and bump fires. It's good to go. Let's break the gun open and take a look at it on the inside. That bolt is what I find to be the most interesting. So the magazine is out of the firearm. Chamber is clear. I'm going to go ahead and release the bolt with the bolt release right here by my index finger. Just push down and it drops that bolt. All right, you have two pins, just like an AR-15, forward and aft. I'm going to go ahead and pop out that rear pin. It's easier if you use a tool. And then that should just hinge down. It started to pull its butt cap off. So you can hinge it down and clean it just like that, or you can take that front pin out. Let's go ahead and take the end cap off. If you just pull down on it and back, it'll pop off, and there's your buffering system, which we'll talk a little bit about here in a moment. To get the bolt out, just hold it the other way. Sorry, the biting flies are out in force today. And there's your bolt. I'm gonna go ahead and take the lower receiver completely off. And set that aside. All right, so there's your bolt. Now, here's the 9mm bolt right next to it. I'll give you an idea of the size difference. So what's interesting to note is that the APC10 dimensionally is the same as the 9mm. It's just longer to accommodate the longer, heavier bolt that's needed to increase the mass for the 10mm cartridge. Now this won't drop all the way in, but you can see it'll start, but it keeps you from putting the wrong bolt in the gun. The 9mm bolt fits right into the 10mm receiver. So dimensionally, in this area, they're the same. This is just slightly longer than the 9mm. All right, let's set that bolt aside. Now you'll notice here, you can see the folding charging handles on either side, and it moves freely, and you don't need to take that non-reciprocating charging handle out of the gun for field maintenance. Now you can wipe down the inside from this angle, wipe down your bolt, recoil spring. Now let's talk about this lower. The lower, this is your bolt stop, so when the magazine is empty, it pushes this up, and that's what locks your bolt open. Inside, you're going to find an AR-15 type trigger. Now, it's very close to an AR-15 trigger in that you can take this trigger out, and this is what's coming from the forums. I've never taken the trigger out of one of these, but people have successfully taken this trigger out and put it into an AR-15, and it functioned. You can take a mil-spec AR-15 trigger, according to the forums, and drop it in here, but the key being mil-spec. However, in doing so, you'll notice that the hammer is in the fired position, and I can still put the weapon on safe. You lose that functionality should you put a mil-spec AR-15 trigger into the APC9 lower, or 10 in this case. So, very interesting. Now let's talk about that buffer. The buffer, this one is marked APC 9, 40, and 45, then T. It doesn't have 10mm on it. But apparently, all the calibers use the same hydraulic buffering system. So what does that mean? When the bolt comes to the rear, instead of smacking into a solid rear trunnion, it has this buffer that's hydraulic that the faster you push, the more it's going to resist, and it's going to slow that bolt down before it impacts the rear of the gun. So this buffering system is what makes that recoil impulse feel so muted in 9mm and in 10mm. So it's very neat. And that's something you're not going to find in other firearms that are on the market, again, because it is patented. To put the gun back together, you can just drop the bolt into the receiver. The recoil spring has a little cone on one end. That cone you want to face outboard. All right, so like this, because it will interface with the cup on the end cap, right there by my index finger. Once you have that in, put the buffer down in the larger opening in the bottom, push in and up, and that spring will hold the end cap in place. Take your lower, and now you're probably asking, can I take the lower off the APC9 and put it on the 10? The answer to that question is no, and this goes back to the overall length issue. If I pin it here in the front, you'll notice it's short. So even the trigger housing is different from the 9 to the 10 being slightly longer. All right, pin that lower back on. And the gun is back together. The APC10 retails for $24.99, so for $2,500. It is not an inexpensive firearm, not by any stretch of the imagination. So then people will say, is it worth it? Well, worth is subjective. If you have $2,500 laying around, you can afford a gun like this. Is it worth it? Absolutely. If you're not going to make your next car payment because you went out and bought it, no. So it really is subjective as to who's looking at buying something like this. This is top of the line premium equipment, and you know, typical Swiss quality. I absolutely love the thing. It's every bit as nice as my older generation APC9, and I like the newer Pro features. So it's a very, very cool firearm. The only thing I can really ding it for is a slight ergonomic ding. Now, the selector lever, or as Grand Thumb would say, the gas pedal, on the left-hand side is the same dimensions, but it sticks out just a little bit further, so it's really easy to get your thumb on if you're a right-handed shooter. However, it's slightly less tall this way on the right-hand side of the firearm, but when it's in the fire position, when I do a deep grip, when it recoils, it bites right into my knuckle of my index finger. So I'll want to grip a little bit lower. If I switch this grip out to a wider grip, like a mag pull, something like that, the MOE grips that are really thick and kind of rubbery, I'm pretty sure I can get away from that. HB Industries makes a delete kit for this. If you can find one available, that, or you can just kind of take the edge off with the Dremel tool to your $2,500 firearm, so that's up to you. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you'd like to support us here at the Military Arms Channel, the best way to do that is to become a Patreon supporter. We're supported by you, our viewing audience. We're not supported by B&T or any of the manufacturers. So there's a link in the video description down below. Give that link a click and consider becoming part of our Patreon family. Also, right here on YouTube, underneath the video player that you're watching right now, there's a little join button. Click that join button, check out some of the perks, and consider joining us right here on YouTube and becoming part of our membership program. And last but not least, please swing by and check out coppercustom.com. Guys, thanks for 12 years of support. We'll talk to you soon.